Most people kill their lavender within the first growing season, and almost every time the reason is the same thing. They treat it like a typical garden plant, instead of a Mediterranean shrub that evolved to survive drought, rocky soil, and intense heat with almost no help from anyone. Today we are covering 5 secrets that experienced lavender growers know, and most beginners never figure out. Get these 5 things right, and your lavender will not just survive, it will last for decades. Secret 1. Drainage above everything else. The single most common way lavender dies in American gardens is sitting in wet soil. And if you only take one thing from this video, let it be this. Lavender roots rot faster than almost any other garden plant when they stay damp, and the damage happens underground before you ever see anything wrong above the surface. By the time the plant starts looking gray and limp, the root system is often already gone. Lavender evolved along the rocky hillsides and coastal cliffs of the Mediterranean, where rain drains immediately through thin, stony soil and the roots never sit in water. That evolutionary history is the key to understanding why this plant fails in so many American gardens where the soil holds moisture, and why it thrives with almost no care when the drainage conditions are right. The fix is straightforward. If your soil is clay-heavy or compacted, mix in coarse sand or pea gravel before planting, at a ratio of about 1 part grit to 1 part existing soil. Raised beds are even better, because they drain from the bottom by design. If you are growing in containers, always choose pots with drainage holes, and never use saucers that collect standing water beneath them. In the ground, planting on a slight slope or mound helps water move away from the root zone after rain. If you are growing in containers, use cactus or succulent mix rather than standard potting soil. It has less water retention and more grit, and that difference is enough to prevent the slow, cool dampness that starts root rot. Lavender grown in USDA zones 5 through 9 in properly draining conditions can live for 20 years or more with minimal attention. The same plant in a waterlogged bed will not make it through one wet winter. Drainage is not one factor among many. It is the foundation every other success depends on. Secret 2. Prune the right way at the right time. Most people either never prune their lavender or they cut it back too hard at the wrong time. And both mistakes lead to the same outcome: a woody, unproductive plant that stops blooming and eventually dies from the center out. Lavender does not regenerate from old wood the way many shrubs do. If you cut into the thick, gray, woody base of the plant, it will not send up new shoots. That section is essentially dead wood, and the only growth potential lives in the softer green tissue above it. The rule is simple, but easy to get wrong. Prune into the green growth only, never into the gray wood. The best time to prune lavender in most American growing zones is in early spring, just as the plant starts to show the first tiny green buds at the base of the stems, and then again lightly after the first flush of blooming in summer. The spring pruning should take off about 1/3 of the plant's height, shaping it back into a tight mound. This removes winter-damaged tips, encourages dense new growth from the base, and sets the plant up for its strongest bloom season of the year. Lavender in USDA zones 5 through 8 typically needs its main pruning in March or April, while growers in warmer zones 9 through 11 can prune a few weeks earlier in February. Sharp pruning shears matter here. Crushing the stems with dull blades leaves the plant vulnerable to fungal disease at the cut site, which is exactly the kind of wound that kills lavender from the inside out over winter. In areas with very mild winters, some growers do a gentle fall tidy-up as well, removing spent flower stems and obviously dead tips before the cold sets in. But this should be light work only. The main structural shaping always happens in spring. Prune clean, prune into the green, and your lavender will reward you with a fuller, better blooming plant every year. Secret 3. Stop feeding it. Here is the gardening advice that goes against almost every instinct. Do not fertilize your lavender. Do not amend the soil heavily with compost before planting. Do not add manure, rich potting mix, or high nitrogen fertilizer anywhere near the root zone. Lavender evolved in conditions most gardeners would describe as terrible: thin, rocky, alkaline soil with very low organic matter and almost no available nutrients. In those conditions, it thrives. Move it into rich, amended soil and start feeding it, and two things happen. First, the plant produces a large amount of lush, soft growth that has no structural strength and is highly attractive to aphids and fungal disease. Second, that soft growth does not harden off properly before winter, which means it dies back in the cold rather than going into healthy dormancy. The result looks like winter damage, but the real cause happened months earlier when the soil was too rich. What lavender actually wants is a soil pH between 6.5 and 7.5, leaning toward the alkaline side. A common mistake is seeing lavender displayed alongside petunias at garden centers and assuming it needs the same treatment. It does not. Feeding lavender like a flowering annual will damage it in a single growing season. If your soil tests acidic, adding agricultural lime before planting is one of the few soil amendments that actually helps. Grit, gravel, and coarse sand improve drainage and replicate the rocky Mediterranean conditions the plant evolved in. If you want to give lavender any additional support at all, a light top dressing of crushed oyster shell or horticultural grit in spring is far more useful than any fertilizer. Lavender grown in USDA zones 5 through 9 on lean, gritty, slightly alkaline soil will consistently outlast and outbloom lavender grown in rich, heavily amended beds, and it will require far less attention to do it. Secret 4. Full sun is not optional. Lavender needs a minimum of 6 hours of direct sunlight every day to stay healthy, and 8 hours is better. In partial shade, the plant survives, but it stretches, weakens, blooms poorly, and becomes vulnerable to the fungal diseases that thrive in low light, low airflow conditions. In full shade, it does not make it at all. That is not a preference. It is a biological requirement built into a plant that evolved on open, sun-exposed hillsides where the Mediterranean sun is intense for most of the year. When choosing a planting spot, look for the location in your yard that gets the most uninterrupted light, and avoid planting near walls, fences, or large shrubs that cast afternoon shadow. South-facing and west-facing beds tend to offer the strongest light exposure for most properties in the United States. Airflow matters almost as much as sunlight. Lavender planted in crowded beds where air cannot circulate around the stems is far more prone to fungal problems than lavender planted in an open, breezy spot. Space plants at least 18 to 24 inches apart to allow good airflow as they mature. In USDA zones 7 through 11, where summer heat can be very intense, a location with some light afternoon shade during the hottest weeks can reduce heat stress without significantly cutting overall light exposure. A lavender that is stretching toward the light, producing long, weak stems with sparse foliage, is telling you directly that it needs more sun. Moving it to a sunnier spot while the plant is still young and relatively small is far easier than trying to nurse a shaded, struggling plant back to health. In zones 5 and 6, where the growing season is shorter and sun less intense, full sun all day is the goal, without compromise. One note worth mentioning: lavender is mildly toxic to dogs and cats if eaten in large amounts, and concentrated lavender essential oils should always be kept well away from pets, regardless of the season. Secret 5. Match the variety to your zone. The most overlooked secret in growing long-lived lavender is matching the variety to your specific climate, and this mistake accounts for more lavender deaths than almost anything else. There are hundreds of varieties on the market, and they differ significantly in cold hardiness, heat tolerance, and humidity resistance. English lavender, Lavandula angustifolia, is the most cold hardy of the commonly grown types, surviving reliably in USDA zones 5 through 8 and even into zone 4 with proper drainage and winter mulching. Varieties like Hidcote and Munstead have been the gold standard for colder regions for over a century, with compact habits and exceptional hardiness. Spanish lavender, Lavandula stoicus, with its distinctive rabbit ear bracts, is better suited to USDA zones 7 through 9 and does not handle prolonged hard freezes well. In zone 6 and colder, Spanish lavender is best treated as an annual, unless brought indoors for winter. French lavender, Lavandula dentata, is the least cold hardy of the major types, thriving in USDA zones 8 through 11 and requiring protection or indoor overwintering anywhere colder. In mild winter regions like coastal California, the Southwest, and the Gulf South, French lavender can grow into a large, nearly ever-blooming shrub. In the humid Southeast and Pacific Northwest, humidity is as big a challenge as cold. And in those regions, it is worth looking for varieties specifically bred for humidity tolerance. Phenomenal lavender was developed for exactly those conditions and has shown strong resistance to heat, humidity, and cold down to Zone 5, making it one of the most reliable choices for difficult climates. The practical rule is simple. Check the zone rating before you buy. If a lavender at a garden center carries no zone information, look it up before you take it home, because buying the wrong type for your climate is a near guarantee of failure, no matter how well you care for it. Match the variety to your zone, give it drainage, full sun, and lean soil, and you will have lavender that outlasts most other plants in your garden by years. If any of these secrets change the way you think about growing lavender, hit the thumbs up and share this with someone whose lavender keeps failing. Subscribe to Evergreen Garden for weekly videos on gardening, medicinal plants, and natural living. We will see you in the next one.